Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. Jeremy Warner with Derek Piper. And man, this was an emotional week, emotional offseason for Illinois basketball. And of course, an emotional Friday in just the Illini Nation with Bobby Roundtree. But we will honor Bobby Roundtree in a later podcast. I have so many thoughts, and I do want to gather thoughts from people who are much closer to him as well before we pay tribute to him. But obviously our condolences are with him and his family. And if you have not read Joey Wagner's piece on Bobby and the rehab facility, I highly encourage you to do so. I felt for Joey because he was supposed to meet with Bobby yesterday. And he met him. He went to the rehab facility down in Florida, took a flight down there, and we were just so heartbroken. But Joey had to pivot and did an unbelievable job professionally in writing that story. But there was another big story, and it was a whirlwind of emotions yesterday. And I don't think Illini fans should feel bad about being happy about something in such a tragic day. And that is Kofi Cockburn returning to Illinois basketball and returning them back towards the top of the Big Ten and towards the top of the nation. But Derek, what a seismic change for college basketball. What a seismic change for Illinois basketball. And what an exclamation point to end this weird, chaotic offseason.
You come out of it and you're a team that has a lot of upside. You still feel like that window is there to do something, really memorable and to advance deep in the tournament. And you worried that closed last March when you faced Loyola and the unfortunate, disappointing loss and all that's gone on throughout this offseason. And we'll break down kind of the timeline as far as when this even became a real possibility. But when Kofi's back on the table, you got to make sure that guy comes back to Champaign. And it was tough with Kentucky in the mix, circling, whatever involved or just somewhere on the table at the very, very least. And credit to Brad Underwood and Jeff Alexander. Alexander in particular was really involved in this. Spent all of last weekend in Atlanta following Kofi around and being there when his mentor was there, and just a lot of the legwork and conversations. And I do think Orlando Antigua set Jeff up before leaving Illinois to know that, before Kofi hits the portal or anything, there was going to come a point potentially that Kofi was going to sit down and say, okay, I have a decision to make. Now, it seemed like he made that decision a month earlier than they would have thought, instead of it being in July, and that was already made. But hey, here's who you need to talk to as far as trying to help work this thing out and allow Kofi to make the best decision for him. But you get one of the most, if not the most dominant player in college basketball coming back to your campus, and one of the two consensus All-Americans from last year, the other being Drew Timme from Gonzaga. So it rises Illinois up from being, I still think that with their backcourt talent could have challenged for a top half Big Ten spot for an NCAA tournament berth. But as we've talked a lot about with the big fellow back, you can dream big again, and right there at the top of the Big Ten, and a chance to really compete again at the national level.
All right, Derek, I want to get into the micro, the nitty gritty of all of this decision, of what this does for Illinois' roster. We can break down how they'll play, who will play, what the rotation will be. But I want to start macro, because this was a ridiculous offseason for Brad Underwood. And Joey Wagner just had a piece that he had written, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that Brad Underwood has withstood. He has withstood this flurry, this crazy offseason. And it feels like they come out even stronger than we would have imagined in the first place, because I didn't think Kofi Cockburn and Omar Payne would be on the same team. I didn't think Alfonso Plummer would be the guy to replace Adam Miller and maybe, have a higher floor, at least year one. I think Adam Miller's going to be a great player, but you lost Adam Miller. Ayo Dosunmu goes pro. Kofi Cockburn goes into the draft. You lose all three assistants. And here you are today, T-Rank top 5 team, CBS Sports top 15 team, wherever you want them, somewhere in that range. And you aren't going to have the 2005 after effects, right? Like, this isn't going to be a team that all of a sudden drops off the face of the earth. You have a top, class right now. I know they got a lot of work to do to have a top 10 class at the end of 2022, but Jaden Epps and Sincere Harris are a heck of a start. And you seem to be doing well in recruiting with Chester Frazier, and we'll see what Jeff Alexander and Tim Alexander do, or Tim Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's amazing. They feel like they're in a better place than where they started in the offseason, which is crazy to me. Or maybe I'm just thinking about where they could have been 2 months ago based on all of this. But Illinois basketball is going to have a run in the Big Ten where they are 3, 4, 5 years towards the top. They have the opportunity to do that now.
Yeah, and that staying power really matters as far as building this out and having it be sustainable when you don't have, Io come back for that third year, when you don't have Kofi, as far as obviously they came back for the third years, but when those guys move on to be able to have just a talent base. And I think that we're seeing it in 2022 with some of this, and a lot of that, as you mentioned, is Chester's connections and what he's bringing to the table. But Illinois is a brand that showed a lot last year and even the year before that this is a winning program. It's a team that competes in that top echelon of the Big Ten. And for that to extend into this season and just continue to kind of set that expectation or that bar or whatever it may be, that's important when you recruit going forward and try to, again, keep this as, we're up at the top to stay. We're not going to, make it to the mountain top and then fall all the way down, which was a fear at one point when you lose all three assistants, when you have Adam Miller leave you and Kofi potentially not coming back. So to be in a position where you got two top 100 guards in your class, you're bringing back Kofi, going to be top 10, top 15 in the country. And as we've talked about, Chester just with his connections and the way he's recruiting it, we'll see. We'll see how it goes forward with, Tim Anderson and Jeff Alexander and what that staff looks like over a couple of years sample size. But as of right now, Illinois basketball is still in a very good place and in a spot to continue to have high hopes and compete, at the top of the league.
You just made me channel my John Gross. It's in a great place. It's in a great place. I looked up that quote, but now it is. It certainly is in a great place. And I thought they were going to be fine. They're more than fine now. No matter what with Kofi, I thought they'll be fine. But it's now they're great, and you continue that. I agree, that momentum of building on that year after year. It's what makes Michigan State so enticing to all these kids. Ohio State under the Thad Matta era, it's what made them so enticing. So you stay at the top year after year. It's so much easier to sell kids that, hey, this is what we have. Like, you're going to compete for Big Ten championships here, and that's what Lon Kruger, Bill Self, and Bruce Weber just wasn't able to capitalize off that, right, with his recruiting. So I think that's really important for Brad Underwood to do, and he's certainly doing it right now. And I just thought of this, Derek, not to get too off track, but I mean, there's another world here, another universe where a pandemic doesn't happen. I think Io stays in the draft. Like, I really do. Maybe he's not as high as he was this year. Like this year, I think he's in that 25 to 40 range, it feels like, or 20 to 40 range. And, the year before, maybe he would have been in that 30 to 45 or 30 to 50 range. But Kofi Cockburn, if NIL isn't a thing, I don't think he's back. So there's a little bit of things broke Illinois' way, which is a rare thing nowadays. And that maybe Kentucky had the opportunity and they didn't want him as much because they don't need him as much as Illinois does. So it's just weird, that parallel universe. Some of those things broke Illinois' way. To have Io DeSumo for 3 years, to have Kofi Cockburn for 3 years, that's so rare nowadays.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And Illinois would say that they were due for some things to go their way and to catch a couple of breaks because, like you said, they absolutely did with Io coming back last year. I fully would have expected him to stay in that draft if he had a combine. And he said himself that that was his full intention. And it was a mental shift for him to really be like, okay, I am actually going to consider going back to school. And you get him to be a Bob Cousy Award winner, a first team All-American, a guy that really cemented his legacy and took Illinois on quite a ride with. That's not to say that, other guys like Kofi and like Trent Frazier and those that were involved in last year's run were a big part as well. But Kofi, if NIL doesn't click in this year, not coming back. It's not happening. This was a business decision for him. Now, does he have aspirations, like he said in his video, of winning a national title and doing a lot of that? Yeah, that's part of it as well. But because of college being really for him where the money was at, or more money, or just maybe more of a concrete situation versus, are you in a two-way contract? Are you in the G League? What that would have looked like if he stayed through that course. And also Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams having the chance to come back on scholarship and not count against you. We talk about the depth of this backcourt and what that's looking like. Take those guys out of the equation, and a guy like Alfonso Plummer wouldn't have been on the market because he wouldn't have had another year. Not to say you couldn't have found somebody else, but it really helped you when you missed maybe on a Armand Franklin or just in general to solidify what when Kofi looked back to Illinois and saw a team that's still ready to compete at a really high level if he went back there.
Man, the Armand Franklin / Namari Burnett part of the offseason feels like a year ago, Derek.
Whew. Sure does, right? Oh my goodness.
Feels like, I mean, Dawson Garcia feels like a month ago at this point based on the Kofi thing. All right, let's focus on Kofi. Derek, why is he coming back? Why did he decide, despite having interest elsewhere, despite having a chance to go pro, why is he coming back to Illinois?
Yeah, I think coming back in general, as we just highlighted, I think NIL and the opportunity to provide for his family, to make money as a 21-year-old going to turn 22 this season, that was coupled with the feedback in the NBA of, you aren't guaranteed to get drafted. Obviously, that's probably turning toward you're not getting drafted, and you could be in the G League, not necessarily even on a two-way, and not maybe make what you'd want to make, as far as you wouldn't be guaranteed necessarily six figures, where you go back to college and $500,000 wouldn't be out of the question. We've talked about some of what's been thrown out there for different guys as far as projections and everything. But as far as Illinois goes, the established brand of Illinois definitely mattered as in terms of a local nucleus for him, that he can go back to Champaign, a basketball hungry market where he's the star, right? Him and Curbelo, obviously, but and then you can tap into some of the regional markets, whether it be Chicago or Illinois, when they matter, when they're nationally relevant, as a player up there, and something that you can tap into. And then nationally, I think he's one of those just familiar, recognizable faces in college basketball, which he would have had anywhere, but that made sense for him. And that was something where Illinois was really strong in their pitch. And then familiarity and fit, as far as the basketball part of it goes, as far as relationships go, the trust level in Brad Underwood, Jeff Alexander, Adam Fletcher, and then his teammates, a guy like Andre Curbelo that he knows is going to get him the ball, and the way he's used. And I mean, their systems, both offensively and defensively, are centered around Kofi. So you go somewhere else and it can be a little bit different. You can go somewhere else and have a point guard that'd rather get his shot than get you set up. So I think all of that factored in. And then you do have to mention Kentucky. And I won't sit here and say I know 100%. I think there's a lot of speculation out there where it seemed like early on they were what everyone, the national pundits, were saying it was over. That's where he was going. At the very end, it was, well, we didn't want him anyway. Maybe it's somewhere in between, I think. But I was told that I think that, and you brought up Orlando earlier, if Orlando really, he carried the most weight of anybody in this thing. If he said, I'm going to go get that dude, I think he would have went and got that dude. I think that in the end, that he would have pulled it off. So there was clearly something that it was either on Orlando's side that he wasn't fully comfortable with, either on, like you mentioned, the fit, because you have Sheboy, you have Damian Collins, you're trying to get Jalen Duran. So maybe it's a factor and a mixture of different things going in there. But I do agree that Kentucky didn't seem to be all in there. But I don't think if you're Illinois, you necessarily apologize for, okay, maybe you didn't knockout punch them and walk away the champion, but you got your dude back. Yep. And they were at least sniffing around at the very, very least. So I think Illinois did a really good job of making sure Kofi comes back to Illinois, regardless of, how serious or how that really played out.
Listen, Kentucky would have had embarrassment of riches in the post if they added Kofi Cockburn. I think they'd be a top 5 team if they added Kofi Cockburn. They're not that right now. They're top 10, top 15 right now. They didn't need him, no. I mean, Oscar Sheboy is a really good big, really kind of a more versatile big if they want to play a certain way. Kofi is your team. He will dictate almost everything Illinois does when he is on the court. And for Illinois, that's great, right? For Kentucky, I mean, it might not be as great, but I mean, he also would have played 25 minutes a game most there, which he's still one of the best players in the country there. I'm not arguing that, but Sheboy's got to get on the court. And they usually run this kind of, hey, 5 in, 5 out thing because they got so many great players. And NIL wise, listen, we don't know what this all looks like. And maybe Kentucky has something lined up where Kofi Cockburn could have definitely made $500,000. But I just think the brand Cockburn has at Illinois, fans are going to buy whatever he wants to sell. I'm surprised he didn't have t-shirts out there already, though t-shirts are probably a very small part of this deal. Like Nike or somebody, like, I don't know why they wouldn't. He's one of the faces of college basketball, and for one of the most crazy fan bases they have. Kentucky's probably even crazier, but I just thought it made a lot of sense basketball wise, NIL wise, like all along. And it's understandable that Kentucky maybe wouldn't be all in on him, even though he'd be great. Like Illinois, they knew they were all in on him, and they must have had good conversations NIL wise to make it happen. It's really interesting because Kofi is the rare player, Derek, where he's a college basketball great, right? Like he is one of the best players in college basketball, but he's not quite a fit for the NBA, right? Like he's not a perfect fit. Like usually a guy who's an All-American, 7 foot, he's going to be in the NBA. Even after his freshman year stats, usually a guy that averaged 13 and 8 as a freshman, usually a one and done. He's just that rare guy, though the Big Ten's had a few of them, like Luka Garza stayed all 4 years. Ethan Happ stayed all 4 years. The Big Ten just draws these big men who aren't perfect fits for the current NBA, but those programs, think about what they did with all those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a bruising league, and where front court play and battling the post obviously is really key to competing in the top levels of that league. And you've seen the flip side of it. You've seen the Diamond Stones of it, the Deontay Davises,
Yeah.
Noah Vonleh, who was really good for 1 year at Indiana, but those guys obviously are then gone. And
Thomas Bryant, they got hit 2 years of him, and it felt like, how good was that for Indiana? Like even getting 2 years out of that guy nowadays. So like getting third out of Kofi is just a massive bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And not that you don't want to see those kind of guys get opportunities, get picked, even if it is in the second round. But some of those names that we've mentioned, you're probably questioning, where are those guys? We don't see them on some NBA roster. I know Thomas Bryant's been in the mix there, within the NBA, but G League and whatnot. But it is a very
another one, Nigel Hayes.
Nigel Hayes, yeah,
their 4-year guy.
Very interesting situation for Kofi. And I mean, there is going to be someone out there that's saying maybe 2 years of NIL is better than whatever's going to be after this year. But
he can do 3.
That's true.
Break every record at Illinois if you want. Like, I don't think he would, but can you imagine a 25-year-old Kofi Cockburn like in the Big Ten? Because last year's a freebie. He could have 3 more years at Illinois if he wanted, and I bet he could make millions. I say millions plural of dollars at Illinois.
Might as well be Dr. Cockburn by then, or as many years as he'll be in school.
That's right. That's right. All right, Derek. Okay, so when Kofi entered the draft, what were your thoughts then? Like, what was your expectations, and what were you hearing around Illinois or college basketball? Like, do people think, yeah, he'll test it and then he'll come back? Like, what did you think then?
I thought at that time it was probably 50-50. And I know that him internally was leaning towards going pro, if not dead set on likely making that decision. I thought it was similar to Io, where the NBA needed to be the ones to tell him that, hey, it's probably best for you to go back. It wasn't going to be on Illinois' end to push that. And they felt like it was going to be him going in, intending on staying in, getting the feedback. Then we'll sit down in July and really have this conversation. We'll provide our input and the feedback that we're able to get versus, what you hear at the combine and whatnot. And I thought that, really based on his showings or his projections or really just his mindset of, because I wasn't at that time considering NIL for this upcoming season and what that obviously factor really pushed this one way or another. So I said to myself, 21 years old, going to turn 22, chance to make money regardless of where that is, whether it's G League, overseas, 2-way contract, that there was a really good chance that he would stay in. Now, the conversation, what was being said to me and some of my conversations was, he's going to make it sound like he's gone for sure. Now, we're going to have an opportunity to really sit down and talk with him. But he, number one, is really interested in just this being it. He kind of went into college with a 2-year type of projection or just kind of an expectation. I'll be there for 2 and then I'll go, which Illinois will say thanks to you for having that instead of I got to be a one and done or I'm going to freak out here. So that was kind of how it got approached. Obviously, as things progressed, he got some feedback or just pushed in a direction where before that conversation or even before the G League Combine, he was ready to go. He was putting his stuff on players' trunk and selling his gear and all the conversations. There was even some buzz around the team was like, well, Curbelo's trying to get in his ear and trying to talk and see like, where are you at, buddy? You could come back and do something special. And he's like, I'm kind of already made my move. I'm in this lane and I feel good about it. And it wasn't until really around that G League Combine where you heard some whispers of, well, what happens if he gave that money back? Is what he made on the player's trunk, and he's not getting invited to the NBA Combine. There's word that some execs maybe even told him there's not a guarantee you'll go to the G League and even start next year. So some of that was all in the mix, and it was just that growing buzz that started from there. Is like, well, maybe college would still be an option if he's able to give the money back and consider that. And then pretty rapidly from there, it was like, okay, he's legit considering coming back to school.
Yeah, I watched the first game of that G League scrimmage, like that elite camp scrimmage, and I thought, man, he made himself some money. Like I thought he showed some things getting up and down the court and dominating the glass against, some of these. I thought, man, he might have showed he can carve out a role, kind of like Boban or, some of these bigs that are traditional bigs that, aren't good for 30, 40 minutes. But if you get them for 10, 15 minutes in a game, they can pose some matchup issues if you have the right matchup. Then the second half kind of struggled to defend. You kind of saw the weaknesses. And then the second game, you saw the weaknesses and the free throws were bad. And he's got to show at least a shot that can go in every once in a while. And he didn't. And I thought, okay, maybe he's got to consider, coming back. And he did. He withdrew from the draft. I'm like, oh, that's a smart decision. And that comes with entering the transfer portal. So when that happened there, entered the transfer portal. I'm always skeptical. I didn't have any insight like you did. I was just like, man, a guy enters the transfer portal. I usually don't like the odds of him coming back. Like, how did you feel then? Like when he entered the transfer portal and the week after that?
It felt pretty dicey on Illinois' end for sure when something like that happens and the immediate you didn't even need to check your Twitter and see, fill in the blank, say, well, Kentucky seems like a legit option here. Everyone could have thought that in their head as soon as just knowing the news of him being on the open market again and taking those kind of looks. So you didn't feel great about it. You always knew that Illinois made a lot of sense. And I know that we came on here on our podcast after he entered the portal and said, ultimately, I think that Illinois, like I said, makes the most sense and is the best fit for him. And it would just be weird if he sacrificed some of the legacy part and some of the branding part by going somewhere new. Now, did Kentucky make sense in terms of the relationships and why he'd give it a look? Yeah, I get that part of it. And there was a leverage piece to it when you're going out there and trying to find out what NIL projections are. And again, we could spend hours talking about what NIL's involvement in recruiting has done, what it's intended to do, and what it actually is doing, because there's not supposed to be like any facilitation. I'm not saying that happened here. It's just people out there
There
want
are
to hear
promises being made to
yes,
people from these programs when they can't set it up, right? Like they can't be like, we got $5 million of salary cap. That's what we're giving you. Like, right. That's stuff we know in the pros. Like they're just promising this stuff without knowing how it actually works and them not being able to follow through on it. They just have to be like, yeah, go get it. If you want to go get it, that's what we think is going to be available.
Yep. And that played out in the Dawson Garcia situation. So there was some angst on Illinois side of how are we going to come out of this situation, because it is a business decision for Kofi and it is something that he wants to be able to maximize. And why wouldn't he? I mean, he's talented enough, marketable enough. Why not come back to college and make a bunch of money? So that was part of the equation that Illinois had to make sure that they were going to be in the best situation possible to compete with a Kentucky or whoever might come in. You heard LSU was going to be involved for a while, UConn, whatever it may be. So at that point in time, you didn't feel great. You knew you'd be one of the, I mean, you'd be one of the hats on the table. I hate to do the Cliff Alexander reference there, but there was just that feeling of angst, like, okay, Kentucky, if they really push, that could be tough.
Yeah. So do you know how Illinois handled this NIL Derek, I mean, I know Open Doors, and boy, the boards are unhappy with Open Doors, and Open Doors is a resource, right? Like, it's not like Illinois has to rely on them or the athletes have to rely on them. It's an option. If you want to use taxes through that, that's a big part of this as well. But Open Doors can facilitate some things. They do take a hefty percentage from people through all of this. But I know Illinois kind of did some projections with IO and other people through Open Doors, but how have they kind of handled the NIL conversation, whether Kofi or other players?
Yeah, and I won't say that I have full access, obviously, to all what is being discussed and everything, but I know that they lean on Open Doors as far as their market research and what they've put into it. There's a formula based on social media following that is fairly widely used, just kind of to rough estimate the calculations. And as I talked about before, there was a projection for Io that was around 400,000. That was mostly based on his social media following and what they thought that he could earn there based on that with his brand, and maybe what they also have conversation with businesses and kind of feel out what they're interested in doing. Now, one of the X factors here is the motivated, you know, investor or
Io would be very motivated. You're saying investor, not the actual.
yeah.
Not the actual.
Well, I think it works both sides. You could go either way on that.
Yeah.
I think Io would be very motivated to make as much as he wanted, as long as you're, very committed to it. I think the more money you can make there, that is definitely possible. The motivated investor, now that wouldn't necessarily maybe matter for an IO, but for a Kofi who has a decision to make with not only Illinois or draft, but Illinois other schools, or just some situation like that, that's where the NIL can be can be manipulated, and it can be something that's hard to just project based on what a company like Open Doors would be able to give you. But then that's kind of the other layer to it that can really be tilting the scales in a major way.
Yeah, there's this gray area where fair market value. What is that? What is that? Like what relationships with boosters? Like how does the NCAA monitor that? How do these schools monitor? I don't think any of them know. I don't think any of them know right now. And that makes this conversation really difficult. And I can't blame Illinois for going into this relying on market research and a company with credibility like Open Doors. But not every other school is doing that. And then
Right.
that can get really, really interesting right now because Illinois has a history with the NCAA that isn't very good, right? So I understand all these fans who say everyone else is cheat. Josh Whitman doesn't want to lose this job, his dream job, for something he can control, right? Like he doesn't want to go down that way. And I'm sure Brad Underwood wouldn't want to go down that way either in his big opportunity. So I can't blame those guys for wanting to make sure they do this the right way. I think it's important. Maybe other fans don't. But at the end of the day, you get Kofi Cockburn back. And Derek, let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about the team now. Because we can actually, after all of this, in July 17th, we can talk about what this roster will actually look like. Let's do that next on the Illini Inquirer podcast. All right, Derek, a front court now of Kofi Cockburn, Omar Payne, Coleman Hawkins, Jacob Grandison. That sounds a heck of a lot better than the one I had to throw out the other week when Dawson Garcia decided to go to North Carolina, and Kevin O'Banner looked very unlikely. But it's clear now that Illinois felt pretty good about its chances with Kofi Cockburn at that point. Obviously, he changes everything. They were going to be an up and down team, probably have to pressure defense a lot, just like they did in Brad Underwood's first couple of years, that Omar Payne can protect the rim. But if Omar would have gotten in foul trouble, Coleman to the 5, and what does that look like, man? I would imagine they play a lot like they did last year, right? Just a lot of threes, and hopefully Kofi becomes a little bit better of a passer because he's got more guys around him that can shoot pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of pick and roll still, just relying on the Curbelo, Kofi. Obviously, you had Io in that mix as well last year, but for Curbelo to really take the reins and be the lead guard and run that ball screen action and have shooters all over the perimeter. And like you did say with Kofi, is continue to progress and maybe have more than 5 assists this upcoming season, which is something they'll definitely work on with him and harp on, or that be feeding him in the post back to the basket game or catching him that roll and just kind of having the awareness as the defense rotates of what else is going on there. But I think defensively, which is something that Kofi really changes in terms of defending the rim. And I know that he has the shortcomings when you put him out in space near the perimeter, but we've talked about the importance of defense leading to Illinois' success here the past couple of years, and it was defensive rebounding. They were number one in the league in Big Ten play, defensive rebounding percentage, and then 2-point field goal percentage defense. So defending around the rim, defending in the paint. That's Kofi. He is at the core of that strength. And I think that we're even further encouraged because who's going to play behind him now is Omar Payne versus Georgie, more of a legit, a lot more in comparison to Georgie, of just a legit athletic rim protector that can just move all around and has a big wingspan, great elevation off the floor. He should make them even better defending around the rim and then I think shooters, I think they have a more variety and more of a depth of shooters this year, contrary to last year.
And just the easing of pressure off Coleman Hawkins, who is another rim protector. Like Kofi doesn't block a lot of shots for how much he plays and how big he is, but he alters a lot of shots. Omar Payne is one of the best shot block percentages in the country. Coleman was the best on the team last year. It was a small sample, but he could be really good defensively. So, I mean, there's so much less pressure on Coleman Hawkins coming into this year, so much less pressure on Omar Payne. Even if Payne wanted more of the minutes than he'll probably get, it'll be interesting to see how much Omar and Kofi could play together against bigger lineups. I don't know how much they'll go to that, but if Kofi gets in foul trouble, you feel a lot better with Omar this year. But Kofi, how much better can he get, Derek? I mean, I hope we didn't overlook how much better he got. One of the biggest things I think improved with him was hands. He did not fumble the ball very much last year. Kind of that Nana hands thing. Like he improved that. And the drop step, I thought his post, work got a lot better. His touch around the rim got a lot better. So how does he get better? Like, do you expect him to be taking a lot of 10, 15 footers this year? Can he get much better defensively, with ball screens and all of that? Or what's your expectation for how much he can grow?
That's a great question. I do think there's still obviously going to be some limitations in terms of, in particular, defensively. They're going to do everything they can to make him more mobile without, just completely taking away his sheer strength, which is something that he needs to, still rely on and feast on. Because I mean, that's what makes him a great player is just his physicality and an ability to just be that physical monster in the post. So trying to help him further get mobile. And is he going to be a guy that's going to trap the point guard in that, at the defensive end? Probably no, I don't think so. But I think that you can continue to help him there and continue to get him in better shape. I think the mid-range jumper is something they're really going to emphasize. Now, it's kind of that thing you want him to be able to hit a baseline J when someone's going to drive the lane and maybe Kofi clears to that baseline and you make that big man make a decision. Whereas in the past, the lane could get a little clogged because Kofi's setting up shop on maybe the other side of the rim, which not that you don't want him there as far as a putback or just a toss up and have him go get it for an alley oop. And then I think the response to Loyola film is going to be really on display for anyone that's going to try to defend Illinois. Now, is everyone going to be as talented or just as well skilled defensively like Loyola was in terms of what they could do to the ball handler as far as shutting down Io? Of course, you're going to have Curbelo doing it now this year, but sending two guys at him, and if you can bottle him up, Kofi's not a threat. You don't worry about Kofi catching the ball around the top of the key or the free throw line extended. I know that it's been a big conversation really after the season, and then now when they sat down with Kofi in his camp of not only do we want to see that because that's going to help take away one of our weaknesses if we can help you get better there, but also in the NBA where you talk about the short roll and can you catch near the free throw line, either hit that jumper, take one or two dribbles inside, finish in the paint, or really understand when you have a 3-on-2 advantage when the defense rotates of who's open. If they're crashing to me, do I kick to the corner? Does someone cut to the basket? That's the kind of things that I think that can really help Curbelo out because that's going to be, I think, the main counter to him in that pick and roll is just, well, it worked for Loyola, just blitz the heck out of him. We're going to try that and see if we can get away with it That's somewhere where Kofi is going to be trying to develop here in the coming months.
Great stuff, Derek. So while you were doing that great breakdown, I was figuring out like Kofi averaged 17.7 points, 9.5 rebounds last year. It's not ridiculous to think he could average 20 and 10, which is nuts in college, right? With just 40 minutes in a game. Only 4 Big Ten players since 1992 have averaged 20 and 10. Can you name any of them? This is like my old school radio list. I just need Austin Burton to play our list song. There's some impressive names on here.
Let's and how many years?
Since 1993.
Would Big Dog Robinson be in there?
He's number 1. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Glenn
he averaged like 30.
30 and 10.
Holy crap.
30 and 10 back in 1993, 94. All right. Some other interesting names. There are 2 guys on like 3 guys that were kind of on bad teams. 2 from Minnesota big men, Derek.
Chris Humphreys.
Yes. I'm surprised you got that. Probably known better for the Kardashian thing, right? And yeah, one more Minnesota guy.
Jordan Murphy wouldn't average that many points. I'm trying to think who else.
Recent.
Really? Uh-oh.
In the NBA now?
Daniel Oturu.
Yeah, Daniel Oturu. Just a couple years ago, just got in 20.1 points and 11.3 rebounds.
He can score.
Yeah, and then one more from one of the worst teams in the Big Ten annually. But he was a heck of a player. Northwestern.
Big man from Northwestern.
You would have been young, Derek.
Struggling.
Evan Eschmeyer.
Oh, man.
21.7 points, 10.7 rebounds back in 98. I went further and I went 19 and 10 because 19 and 10 seems even more doable for him. Eschmeyer did it one more time, and then Chris Webber. Chris Webber is a sophomore. That'd be pretty great company for Kofi Cockburn, and it's not ridiculous to think he could do it. Okay, so we talked about how they could play, Derek. I know Brad Underwood won't answer this question yet, and he shouldn't, but this is going to be a deep rotation. There's going to be, like if one guy goes down or, if one guy's not able to play, you feel like you can still be a really good team, kind of like Illinois was last year when Ayo Dosunmu went down. Who you trotting out for your starting lineup, and what would be your bench rotation?
Here we go.
Best conversation, right? Now
let the debate begin. I know. Here we go. Obvious ones: Curbelo, Trent,
and Kofi.
Yeah, and then you got to make those decisions at the 3 and 4 spots. Essentially, I wouldn't be surprised if early on, and I'll throw this out as my prediction early on, it would be Curbelo, Trent, DeMonte Grandison, Kofi. I think that's probably the safest route to go.
Yep.
I think that intentions are by at some point in the season, and they're going to make him probably earn this, but Austin Hutcherson to slot in at that 3rd spot. And I know that our board just melted, and there is a war going on between
Ace
people.
Is melting right now.
But and things, positive indications, which again, it's the summer and everything, but there's been
Brad Underwood has a reputation of talking up guys in the summer, whether it's Bosman's Verdonk or Vassell, whoever.
And then not just to his staff, you had the Alex Legions of the past as well, but there's talk that a lot of times best player on the court, this is prior to Kofi coming back, other than Curbelo, has been Hutch a lot of the time. So does he earn that spot by the start of the season? I would lean maybe towards DeMonte Grandison as guys. And of course, Hawkins in the mix is a starting 4-man as well. I think that ideally he's size-wise more of what they want versus, probably playing Grandison more at the 3. There's a conversation for a long time about that right after the season of we might want him to play more of a 3 than a 4 going forward into the future.
Yeah, which would be a great thing for Illinois. I kind of have 5 guys locked into their roles, Derek, and that would be Trent and Curbelo starting, Kofi starting, and then Payne and Plummer off the bench. So you're really coming down to, is it Grandison or Hawkins at the 4, or is it Hutcherson or Williams at the 3? And what good problems to have. And DeMonte isn't going to be full of himself if like, hey, Hutcherson starts. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that. Or if Williams starts, he's a really good option to have as a role player, good defensive player to mix with the shorter, smaller guys in Curbelo and Frazier. And then Hutcherson, man, I mean, he's the ideal of what you want at the 3, right? Like a player they haven't had in a while that's 6'7", long wingspan, great athlete, can shoot it. Like on paper and according to practices, that sounds great. That sounds absolutely great. So if he can stay healthy, which is my biggest question, more so than his talent, that'd be a great fit. And even with Grandison or Hawkins, like I think physically you'd love Hawkins and Hutcherson to be the guys because that's a long, athletic, fast group. And then you got that bench group coming off. And we haven't even mentioned a freshman, Derek. Like for the first time in a long time, we're not talking about, man, Adam Miller's got to start and be really good, or Andre Curbelo's got to be great, or Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn. Like this is an old team, and maybe you have to deal with some unhappy freshmen after year 1. But if you're winning, man, stay on board and you could be great on a great team here. I don't worry about that so much. I know you got to worry about that in the age of one-time transfer, but with the roster you have, man, like that's part of being at a program like Illinois now is you might have to wait your turn.
Yeah, and we've seen it other places in the league where you're a freshman, you don't go in and necessarily play right away. There's a lot to earn as far as role wise. You're not just slotted into the starting lineup. Like, I mean, obviously, Io, Kofi, Adam, all top 50 big time recruits, and there was a need for those guys when they showed up at Illinois. But yeah, I think that there will be a lot of competition, and most certainly there's going to be guys that aren't happy with their role. Ultimately, not to say that they're not going to be bought in, and let that be something that gets aired out publicly or that it is a deterrent for Illinois during the season. But at the end of it, well, that is a factor that you got to think of just in the current landscape of college basketball, and it's a good problem to have from the program's perspective. But yeah, I fully agree with what you said, solidified roles wise, and I do think the thought of like a Plummer, Hutcherson, Hawkins, Payne off the bench rotation, like that's really darn good. And take Payne out those first 3 as far as shooters, like Plummer from beyond the arc, Hutcherson is a shot maker, Hawkins as he can stretch the floor. Like that is really enticing.
And that's where like I want to bring this conversation up because we can start talking about this, right? Is how they stack up with the other best in the Big Ten. Michigan might be the most talented roster in the Big Ten with all the freshmen they have, but they're very young. They are. I mean, Hunter Dickinson coming back makes them a national contender again, right? Like, they got some pieces they got to replace though on the wing and at guard, and they've added Devontae Jones. Like, Howard for the long term has the most talented rosters moving forward, but they are young, and we have seen that play out, especially in the ACC last year, of how young rosters can really hurt you. Purdue, I am so high on. Trevion Williams, Zach Edey. You had Jaden Ivey, I think is going to be a first team All Big Ten player. I'm going to have them 1 or 2. It's a question of me. Like, what do I have them 1 or 2? But Illinois, like they have both the superstar aspect of this, Andre Curbelo and Kofi. And I think underrated, probably even regionally and nationally, is that depth we're talking about. Like what I loved about Ohio State last year was I love EJ Liddell, and Dwayne Washington was a great player, but even with Liddell being as good as he was, there were some other teams that just had a little bit of more superstar potential, and Dwayne Washington was up and down, but their depth was unbelievable. Like they could just throw 8, 9 guys at you, and if one guy was down, another guy stepped up. Like Illinois feels like it's kind of got both those things going right now. So I just look at that roster, I'm like, man, that looks like a 1 or 2 seed again, or at worst 3 seed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at last year's team, who obviously was a 1 seed. You bring back 5 of your top 8 as far as minutes getters, and we know Illinois was successful even in Iowa's absence there for a short period. At Michigan, at Wisconsin, the other players in that mix where you go on the road, you beat the Wolverines by 23, you beat Wisconsin on their home floor, was Adam and Georgia. I think those are guys that would you like to have? Yeah, I think so, but there were, not to disrespect them, but you can replace those guys in my estimation when you have Payne coming in at the 5 spot, when you have Plummer, who second most threes in the Pac-12 last year. Like that's something that he's definitely going to be able to translate to at a high major level, high major to high major jump. And yeah, I do fully agree with you as far as just if Illinois is getting projected, I think they're a top 10 team. I don't see how they're not a top 10 team personally. If they're outside of that or someone's saying top 15, not that that's unfair, but top 20 or lower, I think that they are overlooking. They might say Kofi, Carbello, and who else. And I don't agree with that. I don't
Because Trent
necessarily.
and DeMonte are really good, right?
Yep,
Grandison's a starter. Even take out the Hutcherson because no one
sure.
outside of Champaign probably knows about him or
Yep.
Hawkins, right? I understand that, but Plummer and Payne, like Payne was a rotational big, right? At a good program at Florida. Plummer at a Power 5 program is one of the top scorers, one of the top 3-point shooters, and those guys are coming off your bench. So like if you dig a little deeper, and I understand outside of Champaign, you might not pay as much attention, but I understand they lost Miller, they lost Sumu. Those are two big losses, but they kind of just made up for it really quickly here, and they had a point guard there. And just even longer term, Derek, I'm looking at the 2020 Big Ten standings. The top 5 that year were Wisconsin, Michigan State, Maryland, all shared the title. Illinois, Iowa. Illinois looks like the only team, maybe Michigan State and Maryland have a chance to finish in the top 5 again. Illinois is the only one I think I can guarantee sits in that top. So that just tells you that like longevity again, like year after year, like it's really hard to do. And Illinois has got a great chance to do it with that roster. Like I got to sort out, am I going to pick, I think I'm between Illinois and Purdue for my Big Ten title, just because regular season wise, I think they are the experienced teams, the teams I just trust more over a 20-game schedule. Michigan, man, I come NCAA tournament time, I'm probably not going to want to play them because those young guys are probably going to be really dangerous. And they're going to be in the mix, and maybe a Maryland or Michigan State or Ohio State really, surprises us, kind of like Ohio State did last year. But those are my top 3, and I think Illinois is going to be either my 1 or 2.
Yep, I'm in the same boat with you. I would also be making a decision between Illinois and Purdue. Just having to see it as far as early on inexperience with Michigan. Now, Dickinson is going to be a force. Eli Brooks back, and then a bunch of 2 5-stars, 3 4-stars for them. Caleb Houston's a really talented 6'8" shooter. Musa Diabate is a 5-star big man. So they're going to be uber talented, and they're going to be tough, obviously. And then Purdue with Ivy, with Edie, with Travion, and also Stefanovic in that mix. And they have a good class coming in as well. Trey Kaufman was a really nice player at Indiana, and Caleb Furst as well, 2 top 100 guys. I think I'll lean Illinois because I think that Kofi's the ultimate trump against some of what makes those guys, those other players, really good. And that Kofi versus Hunter, whom I'm going to pick Kofi based on last year's matchup, and just a junior big man in Kofi versus a sophomore Hunter Dickinson. And then also Travion, as good as he is, that's not a good matchup for him. Kofi is not a good matchup for him.
Yeah, ED too. Like you sat there and you're thinking of the post Kofi roster, right? And you're sitting there going, this team they could upset one of those teams if they shoot the lights out, and they have the potential to do that. But if they don't, they're going to get bully balled to death. Like I thought they can beat a team like Ohio State that's got Zegke, a player I like in the post. They can compete with a team like that. They can compete with Maryland with, a big man who's talented, but maybe not as good. You go up against Purdue and Michigan, man. I go, what do you do with Dickinson? What do you do with Edie and Trevion Williams? Now you got a guy who's better at it than them. So yeah, I agree. It's you don't get bully balled with him in the game. And then when you got Payne coming in behind him, look out, man. Like it's amazing how much one guy has changed the program the last 2 years, right? And how much he changes your outlook on one season.
Yeah, it's crazy. And one stat that really showed a lot to me, and again, I know that his running mate, who's an All-American, I'd assume he was part of this, but when I pulled the stat that Illinois was, with Kofi in uniform, 3-0 against Indiana, 3-0 against Purdue, 3-0 against Michigan, 3-1 against Iowa, and 3-0 against Wisconsin. 15-1 against those 5 players that you lost a lot of games to, again, pre-Brad Underwood era or even early on. When Kofi's in the building wearing orange and blue, you're beating those teams like at a crazy rate.
He is, and this was my column, right? I wrote the same thing with Iowa Sumu, but I felt it was the same. he is solidified. He will solidify himself as one of the all-time greats. Like when we start talking about the Mount Rushmore in a couple years, if I do my NCAA March Madness because there's no tournament for some reason, like Io is going to be a 1 seed in that thing now. I don't know who I'm kicking out. If it has to be Deion Thomas or somebody that's great, like Kendall Gill, or right. We're talking about these guys. Kofi's in that conversation. Io's in that conversation. And it's because Kofi, Illinois wins and wins a lot when he is in the lineup. He is one of the most impactful. He might be imperfect, right? He might not be what the NBA wants. He might have some weaknesses if a team can't expose you like Loyola, but more often than not, teams just can't handle him. And he's just the biggest X factor, which is why I thought it wasn't even Io to like, I thought who's matching up with Kofi. And I thought going into the Loyola game, like, no way, Cameron Krugly, great player, but one-on-one, he can't match up. It's just everything terrible that could happen. Io had an off game. Trent had a terrible game. Jacob Grandison had a terrible game. And Kofi, they exposed that, right? Defensively, even though Kofi was the one guy who was pretty effective during the game, I don't like the odds of other teams being able to mirror that very much.
No, absolutely not. And we talk about unicorns as far as, Giannis and some of those players that are just, what do you do with them? Kofi in college is a unicorn. You don't see guys like that, and just good luck having a counter to it. Most teams got to send two guys at him because, try to guard him one-on-one in the post, and you just don't have that kind of brute force to match up with him. He's going to move you. He's going to move even a guy like Dickinson off the block, or make it tough for Hunter, who had a great freshman year, makes one basket against Kofi when they played in Ann Arbor. So he is, and we talked about last year, like if there was a get Io back or get Kofi back, I don't want to disrespect Io at all because he deserves everything that's been thrown at him, and the clutch gene, like the difference between win or loss and those moments with him. That's one thing that you can't, that's going to be a big question going into this year.
Yes. Like I'm glad you mentioned that because they probably lose 5 more games last year without that clutch gene, and definitely like 5 the year before, right?
Right. It was just like need based, or just what's the replacement level player, whatever you want to call it, behind Io, where you got other guards, or where you got Kofi, and what that looks like in the front court without Kofi. It was like, well, you might need Kofi back more just based on pure need, but obviously both guys, like you said, all-time program greats. And I never got to see, like, I was young for Deion, and Deion's our guy, but Kofi's got to be the best big to ever put on the jersey. I don't know.
I called up Warren Tate before I posted that comment. I go, I don't want to look like an idiot, but is this ridiculous? He goes, no. He goes, now Deion was more skilled, right? He could shoot it, and Kofi can't. He hasn't shown that. Johnny Red Kerr was an awesome senior. But like Kofi as a sophomore had one of the best big mans, probably the best big man season we've ever seen at Illinois. And now he's coming back for a junior season to do it all over again. Yeah, I think he's the best. I think he's going to solidify himself as the best big man ever. And I'm going to talk with Deion about it. I just want to ask him about it because I'm sure he'll probably say the same thing. Like, they're different eras, they're different guys, but in terms of impact, when you put stats, when you put winning, when you just put how a team plays, I don't think any big man's had as big of an impact as Kofi Cockburn has had and will continue to have with this program. It's pretty amazing, Derek. Well, man, we almost went an hour, but there's so much to talk about after all of that off season. You getting a break here, Derek? Oh no, you got to go back on the road recruiting, right?
That's right. Next weekend, Indianapolis, back on the road. I love it. So I watched some Peach Jam streams this weekend. Quick little note, I know we got to go. Cam Whitmore's he's a freak. That wing out of Baltimore area, he is just a physical monster, and they've been tracking him a lot. Chester Frazier connection. Keep your eyes on him if you don't have him already on there.
Okay, can I do a quick thing before we go then? All right. This is not Illinois' board. It's not Illinois' board. And I'm sorry we're doing a Piper's guys thing.
Oh, no.
That's the kiss of death. Who are the top 3 Piper guys left in this class for you?
Oh boy, this is gonna be tough. It's gonna put me in a bad spot. It's gotta be Whitmore for sure. Let's see. Epps was one of those guys I was like, okay, if I was going to do Piper's guys, which I'm not doing anymore, he would be one of those. But of remaining, let's go with Whitmore, Shoot, and this is tough.
You picking between the big men here?
Yeah, Huff or Corn. That's tough. Let's go Cam Corn.
Okay.
I'll put the belief in Chester. I love Braden Huff. He's really good, but Corn's upside is pretty ridiculous with his athleticism.
Are you afraid you just gave him the kiss of death? Because
Yes,
Piper's
100%.
all right. The history of Piper's guys is Jordan Goodwin, EJ Liddell. Who else is on that list?
Bryce Hopkins, Armand Franklin this offseason.
Yep. So sorry, I just had to get you on the record with that.
Leave it at that.
But Jaden Epps was. I can confirm that Jaden Epps was, and Illinois got him. He just didn't say it publicly. So
yeah.
Derek Piper, thank you, man.
Yep, always fun.